Hello everyone, I'm aReNGee and I'd like to welcome you all back to another video. Before I begin, I'd like to apologize for a recent dearth of content that I've been putting out. I've been experiencing some technical difficulties. My recording computer has actually died on me, so you may see some drops in quality as I'm working from a backup right now. Trying to get that back up and running, and you can look forward to seeing more content from me in recent weeks. But for the moment, I've been focusing mainly on playing a lot of Eternal. And my reasons for that are actually my reasons for making this video. As we all know, the September Scion League Invitational has been coming up, and I myself have been lucky enough to be invited, so I've been really putting my nose to the grindstone and trying to figure out what people are going to play and what I should play in consequence. And the answer is, well, I haven't figured out the second part yet, but I have in front of you here my predictions for what people are going to be playing this weekend. I think it'll be really interesting to go over the actual list that people submit on Monday and see how close I was. I don't expect I'll be too close, but hindsight's 2020, and I'm not working with all the cards here. So to begin with, these are general estimates for approximately the percentages that I thought that I'd see. They're a little bit rough because I'm making predictions out of a uncertain player base. We don't actually know the total amount of numbers of players for the tournament yet, so I chose 30 as sort of a nice round number that's pretty close to 4 top 8s. 4 times 8 is 32, but I don't think that everyone will attend. If anything, I'm airing a little high, but it lets me get in all the numbers of the decks that I'm expecting and something approaching the correct numbers. So to begin with, we'll start at the top of the pile with the deck that I think will be most prevalent, Combre. This is not the aggressive Combre variant, nor necessarily do I think it's the mid-range Combre that I made a stock talk about a week ago. I think this will be more of the higher end Combre. In tournament settings, a lot fewer players bring aggressive decks to the table, generally preferring more mid-range and late-game strategies with powerful cards in them. So I expect Combre players to really cut down on the aggressive cards and move up to the higher end, because Combre is some of the best late game in Eternal, and I think they'll be bringing that to the table and have a lot of cards in the sideboard to deal with Combre mirrors, cards that uh, in addition to those that they put in their own main deck, the Siras, the Martial Ironthorns, what have you. I'd expect the Harsh Rules to be sideboard today, as Combre players may be wary of the various control decks that they predict may show up. After Combre, I think the most likely deck that we're going to see in large numbers is Felnscar. Felnscar decks play all the best cards in Fire, Primal, and Shadow, and just the sheer power and breadth of options available to those colors makes it highly unlikely that we're not going to see a lot of players showing up with them. In addition, they've been pretty popular and talked about lately, which in my eyes makes them public enemy number one. Or, well, public enemy number two beyond Combre, but Combre has been a force at nearly every tournament since the game's inception. After Felnscar, I think one of the archetypes that's going to be the most popular as a singular archetype is Armory. Armory decks have been coming back in force, and they've been some people's favorites for tournaments for some while. I myself have been guilty of this. Although I'm not certain whether players will choose to bring the traditional variant, the 4-faction variant, or something else, perhaps something new. But I do expect that this tournament will be the first major tournament to feature Armory back on the grand scale since its relative disappearance about a month ago now. After Armory decks, we have the 3-faction control decks. I know there's going to be some here. Some people have been playing them a lot on ladder, but as for what variant they are, depends entirely on the players that actually happen to be showing up to the Invitational. The 3 main flavors of 3-faction control that are available right now are Time Justice Primal, so-called Camelus control, Fire Justice Primal control, so-called Icaria Blue, and Justice Primal Shadow control, which focuses on usually Azendel's Gift, I can never pronounce that card, and sometimes the Last Word, formerly the Deathstroke. There's also a 4-faction control deck, but I don't think that deck is actually better than any of the 3-faction decks, and I'd be more expecting one of the 3-faction ones to show up. If players feel that they can beat Combre with it, I might expect some people to show up with traditional or possibly one of the more modern versions of Time Justice Primal Control. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they match up against all the powerful threats out of Felnscar. But if they can do it, all the more power to them. I don't think Ikaria Blue is a good choice for this tournament, but I expect that depending on the player, if it's somebody's pet deck, they might show up with it. Celestial Omen is a card that a lot of players like to run in tournaments for its toolbox perspective, especially since it allows them to run more one-of sideboard. So since there's a lot of tutoring available in that particular control deck, some players may gravitate towards that. Finally, if it's some of the control ladder players at the moment, I might expect them to gravitate towards the Shadow variant. Shadow seems like it'll be pretty good this tournament against both Combray and Felnscar. And Azandul's Gift is a card that is actually, I thought it was quite bad at first, but it gets better the higher the curve of the deck that you're facing. And I think that a lot of the decks at this tournament are going to be pretty high curve. Gives a fairly good trump card against the mid-range decks, doesn't allow them to slow roll their threats into you. And I would not be surprised to see some shadow-based control decks show up at this tournament. Once we've passed those main contributors, which I'm sort of cheating on, is you can build Combray and Felnscar a whole number of different ways. I don't even know which variant of Armory is going to show up. Could be 3 different ones. And there's 3 different control decks rolled into there. We move into the 2 color combinations, which I think will show up in smaller numbers, again depending on the player. Elation, I think, will definitely make a showing in any tournament dominated by Combray. Some players turn to Elation to break that mid-range mirror. I'm not sure how successful it will be, as Combray players have been showing remarkable ingenuity in both their deck building and sideboard plans, as just the depth of options available to Combray players usually far outstrips the Elation ones. Elation decks generally look pretty similar, as a lot of all your good cards, and there aren't really too many cards outside of that. However, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of players showed up with Elation, as Don Walker's pretty good against the control decks and Armory, and should be able to beat Combray if you can find the correct build. Beyond that, I expect 1 or 2 players to cut low to the ground and ignore conventional wisdom that you want to be going with more of a mid-range strategy, and drop right down to Stonescar Jito. Stonescar Jito is a very fast, very powerful deck, but it's also very all-in, and you can expect that every Primal deck is going to have a whole bunch of Lightning Storms in the sideboard just in case. Jito decks usually need to win game 1 in order to win a full best of 3, but if they can escape that single storm or rebuild from it, they can usually run away with the match pretty quickly. As such, I think a couple of people are going to play them, but most of the tournament players don't really turn to this strategy. After Jito, we have the Stonescar mid-range decks, which I think will show up. I'm not sure how good they're going to be, as it generally seems like what they do Felnscar does better, as it just has access to more primal threats and card draw, while taking all of Stonescar's good cards, as they even play Champion of Chaos. So I'm not sure how successful it'll be. I think a lot of the players that like the Stonescar mid-range strategy will be on Felnscar, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 1 or 2 pure Stonescar decks show up. I know it's been a favorite of my own in recent tournaments. After the Stonescar deck, we have the pure Feln decks, which, again, very similar to the Felnscar decks with a color missing. However, I think the Feln decks will focus more on the higher end, going up to the 8 drops and possibly even the 9 cost last word decks, and be more of a hard control deck. Whereas Felnscar, especially recent Felnscar builds, are more of a mid-range unit and removal suite, with less focus on the card advantage and more focus on just playing the best thing that you can do at each point on the curve. So I wouldn't be, I do expect some players that want to play that high level control to play this pure Feln deck for the superior mana, or sorry, superior influence, rather than going for the full 3 faction control. Although I do expect 3 faction control to show up in good numbers as well. After Feln, there is Xenon, which wasn't really a faction a week ago, but Pepper actually put out a fascinating deck on ladder that makes excellent use of Dawn Walker and has been quite popular lately. I believe that a couple of players are going to be inspired by that and see how it does on the tournament scene, sleeve it up. I haven't actually personally tested it extensively, so I have no idea how it'll shape up against this metagame that I expect, but I'm excited to see how they do at the tournament. I do hope a couple of players bring it out. Finally, in the last slot, I know there will be at least one person jamming Rakano. In the same merit as Stone Scargito, although I think Stone Scargito is a little bit better suited for the job that you're trying to get Rakano to do. Unless players just fall over to Aegis, and tournament players usually don't in 3 games, I think just the pure speed of Jito and its limited number of counters, you really need the mass removal. It makes it the superior aggressive choice if you're going to be going that route. However, Rakano's a deck that's usually that, like Combre, sees play at nearly every tournament that we've run so far, or that has been run so far. So I would not be surprised to see at least a single one in there. I don't think it'll do particularly well, but I think we'll see it. Finally, I think we'll see uh, at least as many rogue decks as we see Combre decks. These big invitational tournaments are fantastic because they bring out all the brewers, all the people that have the exciting tech and think they can break out something new. We've seen True Dawn, we've seen Grimfan bring some really fancy new stuff. Loco Pojo always has something totally out of left field, and I look forward to seeing what he's got for us this week. But I think that there'll be 4 or 5 players that'll attack the metagame from a totally unexpected direction that I don't have here, and I simply cannot predict what they'll bring. Um, However, I am really excited to see it, and I think that that's a pretty wide variety of decks there. I don't think this is going to be dominated by Combray or Felonscar nearly as much as I originally anticipated that it was going to be, though I believe that they will be large forces in the metagame. I have yet to complete all of my extensive testing, so I could not tell you what is the best choice of deck for going into this tournament, but this is what I expect to see, and I'm very excited to see what kind of numbers we actually do get. You will definitely hear a breakdown from me after the tournament. Thank you all for watching. This has been aReNGee with my first video post in a while. I look forward to getting back to you guys a bit more after this tournament Saturday. Wish me luck.